Should somebody guilty of domestic abuse be allowed to inherit the estate of a spouse who has taken their own life? A person guilty of manslaughter or murder is already prevented from inheriting their victim's estate by what's known as the Forfeiture Rule. Today, one man whose mother took her own life after suffering domestic violence met the Prime Minister to press the case for extending the law to cover such cases. Tom Guha's campaign had been raised in Parliament by the Labour MP Florence Eshalomi.
Does the Prime Minister agree with me that convicted domestic abusers should never be able to profit from the crimes of their victims? And will he meet with my constituent and me to fix this hole in the law?
Mr. Speaker, she describes a truly tragic and appalling case, and I'm sure the whole House will share the revulsion that she's expressed at the outcome of the law's processes. I think we will certainly need to have a meeting in order to see what we can do to address this loophole.
Well, after that meeting at number 10 took place, I caught up with Tom Guha and his MP to find out how it went and to hear about how his mother, Roma, a former NHS GP, took her own life in what the coroner concluded was anxiety precipitated by a domestic violence incident.
My stepdad, despite having been found guilty of domestic violence, despite the inquest into my mum's death linking his violence to her death, and despite the fact that she even tried to change her will, despite all those things, he's inherited her entire estate, her house, her savings, her pension, and my brother and I, who have done nothing wrong, haven't inherited anything.
When you say the inquest linked her death to what had happened, what did it say?
So the coroner's ruling was she took her own life while suffering anxiety precipitated by a domestic violence incident.
So that's very clear.
It's very clear.
So what do you want to happen?
Well, I just think it's such an obvious injustice, and there is a principle in law already. If you've murdered someone or if you've committed manslaughter, you can't then benefit from that person's estate. That should be extended to include instances where someone's committed a serious act of violence that hasn't directly killed them but has had such serious consequences for mental health that they've ended up taking their own life. I think it's common sense. I don't think it's complicated.
So Florence, you took this up with the Prime Minister in Prime Minister's questions, first of all, and he appears quite amenable to talking about it. What was the meeting like just now?
The Prime Minister was open and supported us in our move to look at how we change this big loophole in this law. And I think the key thing is there is that direct link. And this is another kick in the teeth for domestic abuse victims, where that injustice continues. And if we are really serious about addressing domestic abuse and domestic violence, we have to look at this small loophole which unfortunately exists. Since I raised this with the Prime Minister, I've been contacted by so many other people, so the true scale of this is still unknown. And what I'd want to do with the Prime Minister's help is look at how we change that law.
I mean, Tom, this has been a sort of a gradual process for you. And this is the first time you're actually identifying yourself as the person affected by this. I mean, what's that process been like for you?
I've gone through lots of emotions. I've been obviously really, really sad. I've been incredibly angry, and I mean, I think I've still got that anger. And I'm also just shocked. I'm shocked that the law would have this outcome. And I really don't think it's intentional. I don't think anyone's written the law with this outcome in mind. I think it's just not quite sufficient. It needs to be updated, and I really hope the Prime Minister can see that. He did seem receptive.
Can I just put you, I mean, if your stepfather were to say, look, that French conviction is meaningless, it was a complicated foreign court, it's not a fair finding, what would that sort of cut away your grounds?
I don't think so. You know what? I'm sure he believes that. I think it's too difficult to believe otherwise. I'm sure he thinks that he's been stitched up by the court, or at least that his actions weren't directly contributing to the death. But a court is impartial. You've got a judge who's made this finding. It's pretty clear.
And I suppose, Tom, in your mother's case, had she not been in a mental health crisis, I suppose she might have ensured that her attempts to change her own will had been the right ones.
Yeah, for sure. In the months immediately following the violence, she was quite lucid, and she seemed okay, and she set in place a load of processes. She did try to change her will. She even started to look into divorce proceedings, But like Florence says, the law doesn't take into account the severe impact that domestic violence can have on mental illness.
Did you come out of that meeting with Boris Johnson hopeful?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, the fact that we got a meeting with him gave me a lot of hope, because it's not easy, and he gave us 30 minutes to talk about it all.
I'm hoping that the Prime Minister was visibly moved by Tom's story, and like I said, this isn't just about Tom and his family, this is many other victims right across the country, and I'm hoping that the Prime Minister will help us in making good on his commitment to update the law.
Florence Eshalomi, Tom Guha, thank you very much. Well, despite offering him a chance to comment, the man referred to in our discussion offered no response.